I'm here today with Frede Rustman, former member of the Senior Intelligence Service at the Central Intelligence Agency, who now owns a private investigative firm in West Palm Beach, Florida. Fred, welcome.
Nice to be here, Lisa.
Okay, the Central Intelligence Agency is charged with doing three things. It collects information, it analyzes information, and it conducts covert action. In fact, it's the only intelligence agency, at least in the U.S., charged with doing covert action. But most of us don't even know what that means. Is it the Bay of Pigs? Is it diplomacy? Or is it something else?
One of the prime examples is in Iran, when we overthrew Mossadegh and installed the Shah. That was back in the 50s. What it did is Mossadegh was becoming very, very communist and aligning himself with the communist group. We thought that wasn't in America's best interests. And so we instigated an overthrow, brought back the Shah, set the Shah on the throne, and for the next 30 years, 40 years, we had a firm, strong ally in the Middle East.
Well, you said instigated an overthrow. What does that mean? How do you instigate an overthrow without physically going in and removing somebody from office?
Political covert action is different than, there are lots of different kinds of political action, of covert action. Political covert action is essentially looking for a candidate that would be able to replace an existing head of state who would have policies more friendly toward the United States. And what it involves is going in there, identifying the candidate, supporting that candidate with money, with funds, perhaps supporting him, or not perhaps, but absolutely supporting him with political backing, with press, with stories about him, with journalist backing, to get him to a point where he could win an election over the current head of state.
So it's sort of going into a country, working behind the scenes to change an outcome so that it's favorable to the United States, doing it secretly.
Yeah, and as I say, you can talk, you can be diplomatic, you can try the diplomatic route. If that doesn't work, if the nice doggy doesn't work, well, then you try the political action, the political covert action route, which is a lot more desirable than actually having to go to war, as we have done a couple times in this last few years, as you know.
And going back to Iran, so the example you used, we successfully put someone or helped get someone pro-U.S. in Iran.
Right.
So things are happy, things are good. We've got the Shah. Obviously, we've got good sources because that helped us get there. Well, all of a sudden now the Ayatollah comes in. Where was the intel community? What happened to covert action?
Covert action had a bit of a hiccup. In the middle 1970s, you probably recall the crown jewels that came out of the agency. There was a congressional and a Senate committee, the Church and the Pike committees. And they came in there and they opened up the crown jewels of the agency. And they found that there were a lot of covert action that had been done, and a lot of that was not so nice. We tried to kill Castro, for example. We developed a powder that we'd sprinkle on his chair and all of his hair would fall out. We did all kinds of little nasty things. So basically, covert action got shut down in about 1974, 75. And to the best of my knowledge, now I'm not there any longer, so I don't have access to, they're not doing it anymore. Or they're not doing it very well, obviously, because of what's happening in the Middle East these days. So that is something that I would suggest very strongly, that we regenerate in the agency, that we do this covert action so that we don't have to go into Afghanistan and fight, or into Iraq and fight any longer.
So did the Church Commission prohibit us from using covert action, or is it something that the CIA chose to do based on the findings of the Church Commission?
We basically chose not to. The agency, up until about 1974, worked under a cloak of secrecy. It's a covert organization. It's a secret organization. After that, with all the oversight, the agency became risk averse, and was afraid to do anything that might appear as a headline in the New York Times. So therefore, we didn't engage. This is very, very risky. Covert action is a very, very risky type of operation to run.
And now let's go back to Iran again, not to keep talking about it. But now, obviously, this is a country where the U.S. has some tense bilateral relations. That Tehran has a nuclear program that it doesn't allow international observers to monitor. They're threatening to close the Strait of Hormuz. And just last week, we found out they're at least supporting attacks on Israeli diplomats overseas. Right? Problems for the U.S., no question. Obviously, diplomatically, we're working this problem, trying to get them to change things. And I guarantee there's some sectors that are looking at military scenarios, at least. If we were doing covert action, how would it look with Iran today?
All right. In Iran recently, actually, I guess it was the first country that started to percolate up in the Middle East, followed by Egypt and then a whole number of them. There were riots in the streets. Remember the picture of that little young woman, beautiful young woman who's shot in the head in the streets? If we had been working covert action at that time, we would have already identified someone that could go in there, an opposition group within Iran that would be a formidable foe as long as it got monetary and political action type support, journalistic support, newspapers, publicity, propaganda, whatever you want to call it. We should have had that. Obviously, we didn't. And we not only supported did not support the revolution, whatever that was, but we actually said, time out, we're not going to go in there, we're not going to do anything. Fast forward ahead, just a few months after that, and then we had our best ally in the Middle East, Mubarak, with Egypt. I mean, he wasn't a nice guy,
No.
but he was our guy, and he was good for American interests. And when he got into trouble, not only did we not have a replacement for him ready to groom and to support to replace him, but we jumped on the bandwagon to throw him out with no viable replacement. And now what have we got there?
Muslim Brotherhood.
The Muslim Brotherhood. So it is not going to be better.
All right, so again, and Libya is sort of in the same kettle as Egypt. Mubarak was definitely our ally. Strangely enough, Gaddafi at least wasn't our enemy anymore. And now we have situations, as we said, Egypt, the Muslim Brotherhood's there. In Libya, they have said that the country is going to be ruled by Islamic law. We don't know what that means for the U.S.
Yes, we do.
All right. We don't know for sure what that means for the U.S. But again, let's look at covert action. Now we've got this situation. If we were doing covert action there, so would we be looking at candidates who are pro-U.S. and trying to help them gain popularity, basically? Is that how that would work?
In the case of Libya, we would have already been in there and we would have identified viable candidates to replace Gaddafi, because down the road, you know he's got to go. Right. He was a very bad guy. I was awakened in the middle of the night during Pan Am 103 when I was in Cyprus. He's not a nice guy, but he was coming around. The problem is we didn't do anything. We sat back. Now that's fine if you want to be isolationist. If you want to just back, we can't do that because we need their oil. We're dependent upon the Middle East. So we need their oil for our economy. So we can't not do anything. We can't be isolationist. So the covert action would have identified a replacement. We would have supported covertly that candidate. And we would have tried to have a smooth transition of power to where Gaddafi goes, our guy is there, and that's what would have been in the best interests of the United States. We didn't, as far as I can see, we didn't do anything. But we did help get Gaddafi out of there with no viable alternative.
And again, another sort of different situation, but back to the Middle East, places where there isn't right now anybody, well, there are people in power. I'm talking about Syria and Yemen. but they are teetering on regime change.
Right.
We don't have a replacement in. That seems to be an excellent opportunity for covert action because no one's yet taken over. Is that accurate?
Absolutely. Absolutely. We need to be on the ground. The CIA needs to be on the ground. They need to be looking at possible candidates that could take over who would be better for American interests than the people that are there. Assad has got to go.
Yep.
There's no question about it.
Yeah.
I can't see it getting worse than Assad, except for the fact that you'll have anarchy, perhaps, because you don't have that iron fist holding the people together. So we need to develop people in power in these countries who would have a favorable view to America.
Okay, but now the other side.
Okay.
It's not very nice to think about going into other countries and manipulating, for lack of a better word, their political system.
It's a good word.
You know, we wouldn't like it if the Libyans were here trying to influence our presidential elections, for example. So what do you say to people who say, ethically, it's just not nice. It's not a good thing to do?
I would say to them, would you rather have 4,000 deaths as in Iraq? Would you rather have that? The treasure that we've spent in Iraq? The human lives? No. It is a better alternative. Yes, it's not nice. Yes, it's dirty. But it's got to be done in secret. And that's the reason we don't do it today. Because we can't keep secrets anymore. Because the journalistic community, and I'm talking about the full range of the journalistic community, is adverse to that, to political covert action, because if we manipulate the press in, say, Iraq, and we start backing a particular candidate, and we write articles for them, and we have them published, those articles then get picked up by the U.S. press.
Right.
And so maybe we're manipulating U.S. thought then towards something. So it's a very dicey situation. People have to make up their minds what they want. Personally, I think it's a good thing. I think we ought to get in there and try to do it without spilling a lot of blood and treasure. But that's something that the American people have to decide for themselves. And if they do, and they do unleash the agency again, they have to understand that it has to be done in secret, that it can't be done overtly. When the New York Times calls Langley, the answer on the other end of the phone has got to be no comment. That's all.
And we don't do that anymore. The CIA doesn't do that.
We don't do that anymore. We're afraid. We're afraid that whatever we do is going to appear in the headlines in the New York Times. And so therefore, we don't do very much in risky stuff. I mean, certainly with the drones and the way the covert action, when we moved into Afghanistan, the CIA were the first ones in there. They were in there with boxes of $100 bills. We passed out these $100 bills. That's covert action. We bought the Northern Alliance. We drove the Taliban out. We drove Al-Qaeda out.
But
then we stopped. There was no follow-on. That covert action worked very well at the beginning.
so the bottom line with covert action, in your opinion, is we are in other countries anyway, whether it's diplomatically, militarily, meeting with pro-democracy groups, for example, giving them that kind of support.
That's right.
Covert action is just taking it to a little bit of another level, much more secret.
Yes, we take it to a manipulative level. You use the word. It's a good word. We've got to manipulate events in these countries to assure, to the extent possible, that the regimes that take over these countries will be favorable to the United States, that they will do things in the United States' best interests, not just let it go.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate your time.
Nice talking to you.